The Secret of Life by Georges Lakhovsky, written in 1939. This book outlines Lakhovsky's theories of life, most notably on cellular oscillation, by first highlighting the effects of 5 plants which have identical variables. After all 5 plants are inoculated with cancer, the only plant that survives and thrives is the one that is encircled by an open, metallic, oscillating circuit made of copper. Later research and experiments done by Lakhovsky and medical institutions who've adopted Lakhovsky's techniques show that this same method completely heals most humans who have cancer, even after chemotherapy failed to heal the subjects. Lakhovsky notes that his techniques heals more than cancer, as he believes it cures most diseases worthy of consideration, as all dis-ease are caused by a vibrational disequilibrium brought about by many factors such as microbes, microorganisms, and that his oscillation circuit acts as a receiver of cosmic rays, which is penetrating radiation, thus reinforcing the cellular oscillation of biological bodies within the circuit, more or less activating the cells by allowing the cells to oscillate at a healthy rate, resulting in an increase of vitality and a return to vibrational equilibrium. Lakhovsky also notes the correlation for lower cancer rates in regions that have certain soil types, such as sand, limestone, and primitive rocks, basically soils that allow cosmic radiation to penetrate the earth, as opposed to soils with plastic, clays, gypsum loam, phosphorus, chalk, iron material, etc., which reflect cosmic rays, resulting in higher cancer rates in the latter regions. I won't be covering the connection to cancer and soil in this essay. Lakhovsky also believes that all beings emit radiation and are able to detect subtle radiation in their environment. Lakhovsky's goal of wanting to research something that would benefit humanity proved fruitful after discovering the effects that an open metallic oscillating circuit has on biological life. The Secret of Life showcases Lakhovsky's theories, which build upon one another to help the reader understand Lakhovsky's approach to healing. On page 5, Lakhovsky writes, "What is this universal radiation in living beings? My theory demonstrates that the cell, an essential organic unit in all living beings, is nothing but an electromagnetic resonator, capable of emitting and absorbing radiations of very high frequency. What is life? It is the dynamic equilibrium of all cells, the harmony of multiple radiations which react upon one another. What is disease? It is the oscillatory disequilibrium of the cells, originating from external causes. When vital resistance is completely overcome, death occurs. If cellular radiation gains the ascendant, restoration of health follows." In Chapter 1, Lakhovsky refuses to believe that certain instincts of animals should be as mysterious to scientists as they are. After considering experiments done on carrier pigeons flying under the influence of magnetic waves over radio towers, it was clear that the radio transmission had an effect on the pigeons, as the pigeons would be disoriented until the moment the radio transmission ceased, which would allow the pigeons to determine their flight path without hesitation. On page 10, Lakhovsky writes, "It is noteworthy that the simplest explanation of this phenomenon does not seem to have occurred to any of the Spanish, French, and German experimenters, namely that of electromagnetic induction on the pigeon's directive organs. They were all baffled by the significance of the phenomenon which they attributed to a curious anomaly that they could not explain. Lakhovsky goes on to state that the instincts of animals could be explained by the sensibility to types of special radiation in their environment. On page 11, Lakhovsky references famous Swedish naturalist Linnaeus, who gave an account of the lemmings' peculiar expeditions, and I quote Linnaeus' reports. At the approach of severe cold weather, and sometimes without any apparent reason, lemmings leave their natural habitat in the high mountains of Norway in order to make a long voyage towards the sea. The emigrating throng, consisting of myriads of individuals, trots in a straight line across all obstacles, without ever letting itself be diverted from its goal. A strong current in a river does not stop them, even at the risk of annihilation. Lakhovsky writes, "Is it possible that these animals are guided in their course by their sense of smell or hearing? Is it not simpler to suggest that these lemmings travel towards the sea, guided by the radiations emanating from the shoals of fishes upon which they feed? Thus, an elementary intuitive generalization would seem to establish the fact that certain animals emit radiations which we cannot perceive, but whose effects are far-reaching." In Chapter 2, Lakhovsky highlights the idea of auto-electrification in living beings by first noting that all birds take numerous orbits before embarking on long voyages. Lakhovsky reminds the reader that the electrical potential of the terrestrial atmosphere increases with height at a rate of 1 volt per centimeter. Thus, at 1,000 meters, there's a potential difference of 1 million volts in relation to the Earth's surface. This electrical charge, which increases in elevation, may explain the reason that birds fly in orbit before a long journey as to electrically charge themselves, which may aid their ability in flying long distances by activating their natural radiogoniometer, or radio directional finder, consisting of the semicircular canals. On page 21, Lakhovsky states, "It is worth noting that electric tension during a bird's flight varies in direct ratio to the resistance of the wind. The stronger the wind, the greater the electric tension acquired by the bird. The weaker the wind, the more this tension diminishes." On page 13, Lakhovsky describes the role of the semicircular canals in birds and of antennae in insects, and I quote, "Some naturalists have stated that the semicircular canals of the ear in many pieces are endowed with special directing properties. If these organs are removed, the operated birds invariably lose their sense of equilibrium and turn round and round as though stupefied and incapable of taking a definite direction." Another observation made by scientists of the highest importance: the fluid contained in the semicircular canals would appear to be particularly sensitive to the influence of an electromagnetic yield, while the walls of the canals consist of insulating material. In view of this fact, we may well ask ourselves whether a great number of living creatures do not obtain their bearings through the agency of waves similar to those transmitted by radio stations. On page 24, Lakhovsky concludes the chapter with this, and I quote, "Extension of the principle to wingless animals. Although animals that live in close contact with the Earth's surface electrify themselves less easily than birds and insects, it is nevertheless a fact that they are endowed with a certain degree of receptivity which enables them to detect radiation, but only within a very restricted radius. Thus, the horse is capable of finding his way to the stable within a radius of 10 kilometers. The dog detects his master within reasonable distance. Lemmings travel towards the sea from the far distant mountains of Norway, and the same principle applies to all animals possessing a tail, for they all electrify themselves by waving their tail in the air. It should also be noted that the tail of animals producing autoelectrification serves both as an antenna and an aerial. Moreover, the tail is in direct connection with the most important nervous centers. In Chapter 3, Lakhovsky summarizes the theories he's covered so far, which are 1. Every living being emits radiations. 2. The great majority of living beings, with very few exceptions, are capable of receiving and detecting waves. 3. Any flying creature possesses a high capacity of wave emission and reception. And 4. The influence of sunlight on the propagation of waves is the determining factor in causing certain birds and insects whose receptivity is specific to fly and to feed at night, whereas others whose receptivity is normal function in the daytime. Now, I didn't cover this fourth one. Just think of nocturnal birds and things like that. So, let us now skip ahead to understand Lakhovsky's oscillating circuit. On page 42, Lakhovsky writes, "We know that an electric current flowing through a coil system creates a magnetic field whose intensity and direction correspond exactly to the intensity and direction of the current. We also know that a variation of intensity in the magnetic field of a circuit creates in this circuit an electric current. The current in question may be the circuit of the coil itself, or of the spiral generating the field, self-induction. The induction current thus produced lasts as long as the variations of the field which created it. By reducing as much as possible the spiral and the capacitor, very high frequencies are obtained." Figure 9. Oscillating circuits of Hertz. Above, the circuit of the oscillator of Hertz is seen. The secondary circuit, consisting of an induction coil, is connected with two balls or two metallic plates, forming capacity by means of two wires, A and B, constituting self-inductance. An open oscillating circuit is thus obtained. The capacity formed by the two plates is discharged and gives rise to a spark between the two balls. The diagram in the middle shows a rectilinear oscillator consisting of a single wire, self-inductance, and terminating in two metallic plates or balls, capacity. In the lower diagram, the plates are reduced to the extremities of the metallic wire. The capacity is still existent, but it is very small. The frequency of oscillations is increased. Lakhovsky continues to compare cells to oscillating circuits, demonstrating that the cell nucleus behaves similar to an electric current. On page 48, Lakhovsky writes, "Endowed with self-inductance and capacity, and consequently capable of oscillating, these circuits oscillate according to a range of wavelengths whose magnitude depends essentially on the values of spirals and capacities. The waves given off are thus of electromagnetic origin by virtue of the nature of the circuits, and are also of very high frequency owing to the minute dimensions of the organism in question." Here is figure 11, a microscopic view of various elements entering into the composition of a cell. In the center is the twisted filament, which, possessing self-inductance and capacity, constitutes an oscillating circuit. The similarity to a shortwave circuit is manifest. The filament shown here oscillates like a coil, having a very small number of spirals. Lakhovsky's theories on cellular oscillation and vibrational equilibrium, as it relates to the vitality of a biological subject, led him to put his theories to the test with results that are worth sharing. After success in curing plants of cancer, Lakhovsky created devices and techniques that will also heal humans suffering from dis-ease. On page 61, he writes, "My experiments have shown that with ultra-short wireless waves or with oscillating circuits in the form of collars and belts, it is possible to establish equilibrium of cellular oscillations and to overcome the effect of microbic oscillations, which lead to disease." Here is Lakhovsky describing how he cured his cancerous plants with a copper circuit and why it worked. On page 83, Lakhovsky writes, "The copper spirals must have picked up external radiations, atmospheric radiations, and that it created an electromagnetic field which absorbed any excess of cosmic waves in the same manner as the oscillator in previous experiments. The corollary of this conclusion is that the atmosphere must be permeated with radiations of all frequencies. Indeed, we know that the terrestrial atmosphere contains a vast number of electromagnetic oscillations of all wavelengths and intensities, owing to constant and innumerable electrical discharges." Lakhovsky stresses the importance of penetrating radiation, which are cosmic rays, in relation to life. On page 89, he states, "It is actually these radiations, cosmic rays, of very high frequency, which were supposed to act on the metallic circuit mentioned in my experiments. It is these radiations which were responsible in the inoculated plants for re-establishing oscillatory equilibrium between healthy and diseased cells. Thus, the purpose of these radiations is to maintain, by resonance and interference, the natural vibration of healthy cells, and to re-establish the vibrations of unhealthy cells by eliminating the radiations of microbes." Extending Lakhovsky's methods to cure human ailments, Professor Sordello Attil of the hospital San Spirito in Sesia, Rome, I'm definitely pronouncing all that wrong, made use of Lakhovsky's oscillating circuits, which Lakhovsky recommended in the forms of collars, bracelets, belts, etc., to cure cancer patients. Lakhovsky notes the most interesting of all the patients who were relieved of their disease. On page 126, he states, "The patient was suffering from pains in the lumbar region and moved with such difficulty that it took her 3 to 4 minutes to rise from the sitting position. 3 days after the application of the oscillating circuit, a belt in this case, the pains disappeared. The patient regained her appetite, so much so that at the end of 3 months' treatment, she was able to move with ease and resume her normal activities." That's incredible. Every time I read that, I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Further on page 128, Professor Attil admits the efficacy of open oscillating circuits for reestablishing cellular oscillating equilibrium, not only in cancerous patients, but also in patients suffering from cardiovascular and nutritional affections. Lakhovsky would go on to invent his magnum opus, the multiple wave oscillator, a device he claimed could cure diseases by exposing cells to a combination of radio frequencies. I will cover this device more in depth by referencing the Lakhovsky Multiple Wave Oscillator Handbook by Thomas J. Brown in future videos. So if you're interested in learning more about this multiple wave oscillator, stay tuned, because I'm definitely going to look into that. To end this essay, I leave you with the concluding words that Lakhovsky leaves his readers on the final paragraphs of the last page for The Secret of Life. On page 147, and I quote Lakhovsky, "And indeed, we live in the midst of a mystery, for do we not see birds, insects, and animals of all kinds, devoid of the faculty of speech, yet manifesting powers as marvelous as they are inexplicable? May we not postulate the existence of thought transmission among all sentient beings? The instinct of self-preservation in animals is but a verbal expression, concealing a reality which is the primary cause of their existence. The whole gamut of radiations, imperceptible to us, is apprehended on their plane, for they are capable of emitting and receiving them. Let us wait, hopefully, for the day when this superlative eye, this wonderful apparatus that we dream of, will finally appear and reveal in all its complexity and majestic grandeur a new world that science has begun to unveil.